Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. And I'm really happy to be here today. So I will, if you like, complete the picture, which has already been painted by a number of previous speakers. I too will focus on the case of Greece. As you know, I coordinated the work of the Truth Committee on Greek debt. So I have various points which I think show the valuable results of this commission. The hearings carried out by the Truth Commission, and we brought to the Greek Parliament Panagiotis Reumietis, who was the Greek negotiator in the IMF back in 2009-2010, at the time of the preparation and the imposition of the first Greek memorandum. In this report, we clearly say that the basic problem experienced by Greece from 2010 was first and foremost a problem of private debt, and this was brought about by the development of a private credit bubble, and this was encouraged mainly by the French and German banks and the Greek banks. Now, French banks for large Crédit Agricole, BNP Paribas, Société Générale, and the BPCE bank, and then the German banks, 3 or 4 big German banks, and the Greek banks, 4 of them today. So there weren't that many actors really, all controlled by very powerful stakeholders, shareholders, and of course they got the support they needed in the BCE in the person of Jean-Claude Trichet in 2010, and of course now in the person of Mario Draghi. Both of these gentlemen come from the private banking world. Now, according to what Panagiotis Reumietis said at the Audit Commission, he said that Jean-Claude Trichet, right from the preparatory discussion prior to the first memorandum, threatened Greece to abolish access to liquidity for Greek banks if Greece called or asked for debt reduction. Trichet's position was that in no way would public debt be restructured in 2010. He didn't want it because the French and the German banks, and perhaps for Papandreou I should add the Greek banks, anyway, they would have to have been saved by a loan of 110 billion from the Troika in 2010, and this figure would then have to be used by Greece to help private creditors, and also so that the French and German banks could withdraw from Greece by selling the Greek public securities that they had bought, but also by getting rid of investment in Greece, because the French banks had bought Greek banks and they had Greek subsidiaries, and the German and French banks directly lent to the Greek companies and households. They didn't go through Greek banks, so there was a very high level of exposure. So by postponing, if you like, the restructuring of the Greek banks to 2012 had a simple purpose, and that was so that the German and French banks could partially get rid of the weight of their Greek commitments, both in the public and private sector, and could also enable the Greek private banks to do the same, because they offloaded more than 20 billion Greek securities between 2010 and 2012. I'm talking about the secondary markets there. So that's the first point I wanted to make. Mr. Trichet, right as far back as 2010, imposed a threat. He said, if you want Greek public debt reduced, I will limit the access of Greek banks to liquidity. So the restructuring was deferred to 2012, and pending this, the ECB, introduced very harsh measures. They didn't respect the Greek constitution because the parliament was not allowed to vote on the first memorandum. And he imposed measures which were a clear violation of a whole series of obligations on Greece and international institutions in relation to protection of fundamental human rights. So that then is the second point. The central bank, ECB, violate fundamental rights and violate the Greek constitution. Then the third point, as Marika has already alluded to this program to buy public securities, so-called the SMP, was introduced. The central bank, this is how it works. The central bank goes to the French and German banks and other banks and buys up Greek securities at a time when these securities were dropping in value. So by buying from those banks Greek securities, the ECB prevented the securities from crumbling, if you like. So 75% of the nominal value is maintained, and then so they buy them from the German and French banks. And this is good for the French banks. So Mr. Trichet was sort of acting as a French banker here, and he was supported by Merkel because, of course, the German banks had to be protected as well. And he was supported by Obama because the German and French banks, if they were put in difficulties, this would jeopardize the American private banks because of the connections between the French, German and US banks. So the ECB buys the Greek securities at 75% of their value, to the tune of about 55 billion euros, and they buy securities. Let me give you an example. If you just could scroll down a little there, yes. You see an example here, a bond issued at 5 years, 2nd of February 2010, matured 20th of August 2015, interest rate 6.10%, and the ECB bought these securities at 75% of their value. Then you had the coupon of 6.10%. But since they bought at 75% of the value, this gives us 8% interest. I hope you can follow me there, because if you relate it with the percentage, you see that the real yield goes up, the actual yield for the ECB. And of course it was reimbursed in July, August 2015, and the securities that it bought as part of the SMP 2010-2012, Greece will have to reimburse by 2018 because the maturity dates are staged, but the last of them would be 2018. And as Marika has said, when the ECB, together with the Troika, organised the restructuring of the 2012 debt, it uses its seniority, if you like, to refuse to take part. So the Greek securities that it bought in 2010, 11, 12, as of 2012, they were only 47% of their original value. It's those securities that the ECB presented to the Greek government in July and August and asked, right, we'll have 100% of the value, please. Even though it got an actual interest rate of 8% on these securities. And I think this is very important. I think we can generally talk of the abuse of a position, unfair rates, the ECB using its status to profit wrongly from the Greek people and the Greek government. And as part of the restructuring carried out in 2012, the ECB refused to reduce the rates, but the the pension funds, the small holders and the Olympic Airways stakeholders that had received Greek securities. So the pension funds, the small security holders and the Olympic Airways private investors lost more than 50% of the value of their securities, and this is one of, I would say, the main cause of the crisis, of the current crisis of the Greek pension system. The ECB and the other Troika partners are responsible for causing a crisis in the Greek pension system. Why? Because these funds lost more than 5% of the value of their assets, because the Greek pension funds were obliged to buy Greek securities just before the restructuring. So they, of course, were the victims of the haircut. So there is an illegality here on the part of the ECB, imposing very harsh sacrifices on the victims of the crisis, who are not responsible, and at the same time it protects itself, it covers itself. Now, at the same time as all this, it imposed conditions. Anyway, the profits, ECB profits. Let's take 2014, the 2014 exercise. You can scroll, please, Tobias. Just go down to the chart there, the table. In the securities owned by the ECB, Italians represent 52%, Spanish 20%. Greek securities account for 12% only of the securities held by the ECB, sovereign bonds. But in the 2014 revenues, the Greek securities, which only represent 12%, account for 40% of the income of the bank, because the interest rate charged is far higher than the interest rate on the Italian or Spanish securities. And even if you read the documents of the ECB, the gains made by the ECB on Greek securities are 7.7 billion euros by the end of the reimbursement, which it will occur in 2018. So, in 2012, the ECB undertook to return to Greece the excessive interest, if you like. During the Tsipras government up to July, it refused to give back to Greece this undue interest by blackmailing, because they're saying, right, if you accept, this happened after the third memorandum, July 2015, we will give you back the interest, but if you don't act as we want you to, we won't return it. And you can see in an ECB document dated July 2015 that after the Greek capitulation of the beginning of July, the ECB, and this is the document in English there, Tobias, just if you could go down, please. It says, okay, we will give back a part of the undue interest to Greece as long as Greece uses this to repay IMF. So it is returning to Greece the undue interest, but with a specific condition, that is that it be used to reimburse the creditors. And I want to come to the Stability Fund, which is the fund for recapitalisation of Greek debt. So if you could go up, please.
The link. There is a link, HFSF. If you could open it. C'est pour vous montrer.
Right, I want to show the composition of the council of this fund, and I think this point needs to be made in Brussels. If you look at the members of the General Council, right from day one, we have Pierre Mariani, who is, of course, a great friend of Nicolas Sarkozy, who managed the Dexia crisis in Belgium. He was on the board of this French, Belgian, Luxembourg bank, and he is responsible for the second Dexia bankruptcy. He was sacked in 2011 from Dexia, but he was given a golden handshake of 1.5 million euro. And where did he go to work? Well, he went to Greece to become involved in the Greek recapitalisation fund, and he was accompanied by Walter de Vriend. Walter de Vriend also worked for Dexia. He, too, is an accomplice of Mariani. He comes from the Belgian banking world, and he is just as guilty. On the board, we also have Stephen Frank, North American, so, Obama, after all, had to be kept sweet. So if you could click on Stephen DeFrank on the document, you will see that he worked for the White House, he worked for the large American private banks, and he also was in the American Army. So an ideal profile to be in this Greek recapitalisation fund. So the Greek banks were recapitalised with 46 billion euros, and they are in a very grave situation. And Marika has already made the point very well here. The non-performing loans represent 40% of loans. And can we come back to the document, Tobias, please? In December, an agreement was concluded between the Greek government and the creditors, so that alongside the recapitalisation that Marika talked of, on the financial markets, there will be a sale to private investors, and I would imagine BlackRock will buy non-performing loans in order to try to recoup something. So the large banks and the American, German, etc. banks and investment funds will buy at a low price, of course, part of the debts on the books of the Greek banks and try to make as much profit as possible from this. In my view, the upshot of this operation will be, or the aim is to dilute the share of Greek public authorities in the capital of the Greek banks, because the majority shareholder, the main shareholder of Greek banks at the moment, are public authorities via the recapitalisation fund. And the December 2015 operation has a simple aim, and that is to make sure that a small privileged minority of private stakeholders, mainly Greece, will control the whole of the Greek banking system and will sell part of the assets to private foreign Belgian or pension funds, etc., speculative funds. Now, Marika and Papadimoulis also have made another point, and that is, and I'm coming back to the first Tsipras government now. In February 2015, the ECB became involved in Greek affairs by saying that Greek banks would no longer have access to the normal ECB credit lines. This is a credit line which was 0.10% at the time. So the banks had to go through ELA, emergency liquidity assistance, at a higher rate and with the obligation to put far stronger collateral. So it began to strangle the Greek banking system as of February. The purpose of this was to force the Cyprus government, and Varoufakis, of course, the finance minister, to agree to the agreement of 20th of February. This is a disastrous agreement, in my view, because the Greek government undertook to continue reimbursing Greek debt without getting any formal commitment that the disbursement of the creditors would occur. The ECB, on a permanent basis, has kept doing things and saying things in order to create fear in Greece. Now, Marika has said that 40 billion was taken out of the Greek banks between end of December 2014 and beginning of July 2015. And at a number of different times, and we saw this with the referenda, the ECB leaders, or officials, Benoît Cœurès, if you could just scroll down a little there, Benoît Cœurès said on the 29th of June, a few days before Cyprus had announced the referendum, on the 26th of June, the ECB cut the liquidity, and then the government the following Sunday decided that on the 28th of June, banks would close 1 week before the referendum. Why? Well, in order to frighten the Greek people into voting yes in the referendum. And to increase the pressure, Benoît Cœurès, who was one of the officials of the ECB, a Frenchman, said that if the Greeks voted in favour of the referendum, yes, they would be expelled from the euro and the liquidity would just be cut off for the Greek banks. And Victor Constancio, vice president of the ECB, on the 3 days before the referendum, made a similar statement. And, this just shows the extent of this scandal. It didn't work, of course. 61% voted against. But the extraordinary thing is that on the 14th of September, the vice president of the Greek bank, Victor Constancio, the ECB, said that, well, when I talked about expulsion from the euro, I was wrong. I didn't mean it. So if you could the same vice president said, yes, I did say this, but it wouldn't have been possible legally to exclude Greece, to kick Greece out of the euro. I just said it just for the sake of saying it. So actual ECB officials, well, they get involved in blackmail and they don't hesitate to lie. They admit having lied. And now I'm almost finished. The situation of the Greek banks continues to be genuinely worrying. Yes, the solution when it comes will be very expensive for the Greek people and potentially very expensive for public bondholders, Greek bondholders. And this is the case with all ECB documents. They always have a clause saying that the Greek government must undertake not to change the structure of the Greek banks. So the Greek banks have to guarantee domination by the private sector, even though if you look at the shareholdings in Greek banks, it's in the minority. So the result of this will be that, yes, the Greek crisis will be resolved, but the consequences, both on the population and potentially also on the international community, will be horrific. So I've been outlining the sort of results of the research done by the Greek Debt Truth Commission, and we presented the document to the Greek Parliament 17th and 18th of June. These documents are available on various sites, internet sites in English, in Greek, in Spanish, in French, in German. This Truth Commission was set up by the former President of the Greek Parliament, and he's present with us today, Zoe Konstantopoulou. It will pursue its work, even though the new President of the Greek Parliament has, and this is very sad, has said that he wishes to bring our work to an end and will dissolve the Commission. So there will have to be a new statute, if you like, but the people will remain the same on the committee, and it met at the end of September when it still had a sort of the official existence, and it is due to meet again on the 4th of April in Athens, so 1 year after the start of its work. And we are currently working on a document on Greek banks and on the intervention of the ECB. We will publish the document, fear not, it's nearly finished. We will publicise it in a public session here at the Parliament on the 1st of March at the invitation of a number of MEPs here in the GUE. Thank you very much for your attention.